animals in the movies. All over the world, there are natural armies looking for new lands to conquer. We're counting down the top 10 most extreme animal invaders on the planet as we search for the ultimate global conqueror. Discover that some creatures really are taking the world by storm when invasive animals are taken to the most extreme.
Earth is a planet of extremes. Extreme places. And extreme animals. Join us as we count down to find the most unusual and the most extraordinary on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 10.
Throughout history, people have been trying to conquer the globe. And as we've moved around the planet, we've taken animals along for the ride. While not all survived in the new lands, others flourished, capturing ever more countries until an elite few finally managed to conquer the world. But our first contender has just started its march across the globe. From its home around Indonesia, one snake's managed to slide into 10 other countries. The brown tree snake didn't swim to conquer the islands of the Pacific. The brown tree snake was caught up in a war. On July 21st, 1944, 50,000 U.S. soldiers stormed the beaches of Guam. The battle to retake the island lasted for 21 days and cost about 13,000 human lives. But even after the guns fell silent, the killing continued. The brown tree snake had stowed away on board Navy cargo ships and now found itself on an island with thousands of birds and no natural predators. The brown tree snake is number 10 in the countdown because in just a few short years, it exterminated 10 out of the 13 native species of bird. It's wiped out 2 of the 3 species of mammal on the island and 9 of the 12 kinds of lizard. If you visit Guam today, you'll find plenty of brown tree snakes, up to 13,000 per square mile. But without birds, the jungles are silent. There are plenty of bugs, though. Now that the birds and lizards have gone, they're free to multiply, just like the brown tree snake. The brown tree snake on Guam is a classic example of what happens when an invasive species enters a defenseless new land. We're lucky that so far the snake's only spread to 10 other countries. There are animals coming up in the countdown that have spread much further, often with even more devastating consequences.
Number 9.
From its home in South America, it's hard to imagine how the monk parakeet could have managed to spread across the northern hemisphere. It's now found in 17 countries, from California through to Spain. The monk parakeet was originally from the mountainous regions of Argentina. It's a highly sociable little parrot that lives in large family groupings of up to 150 birds. While almost all other parrots nest in natural crevices, the monk parakeet uses woven sticks to build a nest that can be over 6 feet long and weigh as much as 400 pounds. Each nest can contain up to 20 individual chambers, each occupied by a different pair of parakeets. This apartment living is one reason why the monk parakeet has boldly gone where few parrots dare. During the late 60s and early 70s, more than 64,000 monk parakeets were imported into the United States as pets. It wasn't long before a few escaped their cages and returned to the life of a wild bird. Now they're found in 15 states across America and are at home in cities like New York and Chicago. These are cold places for a parrot of the tropics, but life in the mountains of Argentina meant that it can survive a chilly climate. Several families of monk parakeets huddling inside their enormous nest can generate enough body heat to survive a northern hemisphere winter. That's why people in 17 countries around the world can now look up and see something strange flying through the sky. But there are other unidentified flying objects that took the world by storm. Flying saucers full of aliens have yet to conquer the world, but they have invaded our imagination. The first newspaper report of a UFO was in 1947. Within a month, 1,500 other sightings of alien visitors had been reported. Half a century later, we have enough statistics to know that the best time to see an alien is at 9 p.m. or 3 a.m. during the month of July. For some reason, reported sightings of alien activity peak every 5 years. That's why in 2008, it's expected that the number of UFO sightings will double. And by a strange coincidence, the monk parakeet population is also doubling every 5 years. At least we know that these feathery invaders don't come from outer space, but Argentina.
Our first two contenders may not have caused humans much trouble as they spread around the globe. But still to come is an invader that gives farmers a real headache. And what tiny animal is hitting the headlines as we fight to halt its fantastic invasion? Find out next on... Number 8.
Our next contender didn't need to feed on radioactive waste to conquer Europe. There really are ants that have set sail to conquer the world, and we're virtually powerless to stop them. Screaming in to number 8 in the countdown is the empire of the Argentine ant. Like the monk parakeet, this invasive insect has spread from Argentina and conquered at least 21 other countries. Argentine ants may be the smallest of our world conquerors, but they more than make up for this because, unlike all other contenders, this species works as a team. All ants live in colonies where a queen rules over thousands and sometimes millions of workers. Ants are highly territorial and aggressive. They are one of the most successful and tenacious animals to ever exist. Sometimes their colonies are so big that they can overwhelm all opposition. The thing that makes the Argentine ant such an effective invader is that unlike other ants, colonies don't compete with each other, they cooperate. The theory is that when a queen starts a new colony in a foreign land, the population is so small that all individuals recognize each other as sisters, even as new colonies grow and spread. That's why the ants don't waste resources attacking other Argentine ant colonies. By working together, they can form a massive super colony that's now conquered Europe. There are billions of Argentine ants in millions of genetically related nests, stretching from Italy to Spain, a distance of more than 3,700 miles. It's by far the biggest example of animals working together as a team that's ever been found. But there once was another army in Europe that found a different way to keep the peace. The ancient Romans occupied the very same patch of ground. Thanks to their strong army, they enjoyed more than 200 years without civil war or uprisings. It was called the Pax Romana, or Roman peace.
Governors, consuls, princes. Here, within our reach, golden centuries of peace.
During this time, they built 50,000 miles of roads, creating the great network that supported Roman trade. But then it all came off the rails. Rome's citizen armies became more interested in enjoying the peace than defending it. And the Germanic hordes that had always nibbled at Rome's border began to win the battles. Eventually, the mighty Roman Empire collapsed, and the emperors ruled no more. As yet, the empire of the Argentine ant shows no sign of weakening. And who knows how many more countries they'll invade, spreading their own form of Pax Insecta.
So far, we've seen ants in armies and parrots in apartments. But still to come is a rodent with a terrifying appetite for global domination. And later, what flying insect has been making a big impact all around the globe? Find out next on Animal Planets. Number 7.
Our next contender invades not only countries, but cinemas. It's The Swarm.
We have visual contact.
Identify.
The black mass, sir. A moving black mass.
We have been invaded by an enemy far more lethal than any human force.
There really is a swarm heading north from South America. They're the so-called killer bees. And with them comes a wave of fear and misinformation sweeping across each of the 25 countries they invaded. But the story of the killer bee starts in sub-Saharan Africa. Here, lots of creatures, including humans, have been raiding beehives in search of honey for thousands of years. Over the millennia, the bees have evolved increasingly powerful defense systems to protect their hives from these honey-seeking marauders. Things are further complicated for the bees because they live in arid regions where flowers are few and far between. Because there was never much nectar for the bees to work with, they became the most efficient honeymakers of any species of bee on Earth. That's why in 1956, beekeepers transported 26 colonies of the African bees to São Paulo, Brazil. The researchers hoped that by interbreeding them with the more easygoing European bees, they could develop a less aggressive bee that produced more honey. But a year after they arrived, all 26 queen bees were accidentally released into the wild. It turned out that European honeybees were no match for the aggressive African variety that became known as the killer bees. killer bees had been moving north at 200 miles per year. They swept into America in 1990, and in only 4 years had captured most of the Southwest. The venom in a killer bee's sting is actually no more powerful than any other bees. It's just that killer bees have the same mean disposition as their African ancestors. So no matter how innocent you look, if you get in the way of a nest of Africanized bees, you're in big trouble. The killer bees are dangerous because they'll inflict 10 times more stings 10 times faster than European bees. That's why people are scared of having these aggressive bees around their houses. But bees aren't the only little animal that grew into a big problem. Leaping into fashion back in 1986 was the Vietnamese pot-bellied pig. This variety was said to be the perfect pet because it was smart, affectionate, and small, supposedly weighing about no more than a large dog. The breed was set to conquer the world until it made a pig of itself. Some owners watched as their little pot bellies grew to preposterous proportions, sometimes as much as 300 pounds. That's because the opportunity to sell any variety of piglet for $1,000 was just too good for some farmers to pass up. The market was flooded with big old farm hogs instead of cute little pot bellies. Unlike true world conquerors, this was one animal that's invasion plans failed because they grew too well. Africanized bees are also growing well in their new homes, but they'll never be able to conquer the whole world. Cold weather will always limit the distribution of these subtropical animals, unlike our next contender, which is used to climactic extremes.
Number 6.
It's hard to imagine the cute little bunny as a world conqueror, but it leapt out of its home in Spain to invade 29 other countries. The rabbit began its travels with the ancient Romans. They domesticated the Spanish wild rabbit and took it with them around Europe. And then, when Europeans set sail on their voyages of discovery, the rabbit went along for the ride. The English were notoriously homesick and tried hard to transform the new lands into something like the old country. So, in places like Australia and New Zealand, acclimatization societies started setting rabbits loose to make it feel more like home. The rabbits had found paradise because the colonists didn't release all the rabbits' natural enemies. In 1859, 24 rabbits were released in Australia. Within 6 years, they'd multiplied to 22 million. The rabbit plague was called the Gray Blanket and transformed grassland into dust bowls. A 1,300-mile-long fence was built to stop their march across the continent, but the rabbits went right through it. The effect on the ecology of Australia was devastating. 1/8 of all mammalian species in Australia are now extinct, and rabbits were the single most significant factor. Lacking natural predators in their new homes, rabbits were able to breed like rabbits. If conditions are favorable, rabbits can start a new family every month, and they can do it over and over again for at least a decade. If a single pair of rabbits and their progeny all survive, they could, in theory, produce as many as 13 million rabbits in just 3 years. That's enough rabbits to devastate any landscape. But at least rabbits don't directly hurt us, unlike our next contender, which has caused more human deaths than any other animal in history.
So far, baby bunnies and swarms of bees haven't conquered every country in the world. Unlike one of our furry friends that spread so far, it's frightening. And coming up, what Australian amphibian is on track for disaster? Find out next on... Number 5.
The next contender seeking world domination was originally found in the countries bordering the Indian Ocean, but has since invaded at least 36 other nations. Rising in to number 5 in the countdown is the mosquito. There are more than 2,500 different species of mosquito in the world, but the latest and greatest to make its presence felt is the Asian tiger mosquito. It's an aggressive daytime feeder, where most other mosquitoes come out to hunt at night. If you're bitten by a mosquito during the day, it's almost certainly the Asian tiger that's been at work. Strangely enough, for an animal that's invaded so many countries around the world, the Asian tiger is actually a poor traveler. Left on its own, it will rarely move more than a few yards from its birthplace. Since it only needs a few teaspoons of water to complete its life cycle, the modern world is providing plenty of new habitats. So how does an insect that never travels more than a couple of yards spread around the world? The simple answer is that humans have literally wheeled the mosquito into new lands. Every year, the U.S. imports almost 2 million tires, mostly from Asia, and the larvae of the Asian tiger mosquito went along for the ride. That's how it traveled to Texas in 1985. In just 2 years, it had spread into 17 other states, bringing with it the menace of diseases like encephalitis and yellow fever. However, there is some good news. The next animal in the countdown eats mosquitoes. The bad news is that it eats just about anything else it can swallow as well.
Number 4.
Our next contender is a poisonous amphibian that's hopped around most of the Pacific and has set up home in at least 39 countries. Coming in at number 4 in the countdown is the cane toad. Often weighing in at more than 5 pounds and growing more than 10 inches long. It's no wonder that it's also called the giant toad. Cane toads are famous for eating almost anything, and it's this voracious appetite that first brought the toad to the world's attention. People wanted to use the toad's big mouth to catch not mice, but beetles. Cane toads were originally found in South America, but in the 1930s, They were enlisted to fight off scarab beetles that were devastating the world's sugarcane crops. That's why in 1931, 101 toads were packed off to Australia. The cane toads loved their new home. In just 6 months, 101 toads had multiplied into 60,000. No predator could stop the population explosion because these amphibians have huge poison glands in their skin. In Hawaii, a dog dies every week from cane toad poisoning. Across the Pacific, wherever cane toads show up, many other species of animals start to disappear. This is one animal army that really knows how to move. In the last 70 years, cane toads have spread along much of Australia's east coast. They continue to push north at 30 miles each year. Once cane toads enter a new environment, they rapidly make it their own. Every year, a single female can lay more than 30,000 eggs, and she can live for up to 15 years. It's this combination that makes the cane toad a real force of nature. No wonder the toad's ancestors were able to survive one of the world's greatest extinction events. 65 million years ago, a meteor crashed into the Gulf of Mexico. After the heat of the initial explosion, the world was plunged into months of freezing darkness as ash blocked the warmth of the sun. It's estimated that 99% of everything alive on Earth was exterminated. But somehow the toad's ancient ancestors survived. They were probably spared because they could keep out of harm's way by sitting in their burrows. Cane toads have shown the same resilience as their ancestors as they sweep across new lands. But they've still only invaded a quarter of the countries occupied by our next contender.
Our countdown of animals battling for world domination is starting to get serious. Because coming up are animals that have followed us to all parts of the globe in search of a free lunch. Your head will spin when you see the extreme things some animals do to conquer the world. That's coming up next on Animal Planet's The Most Number 3.
Our next contender has made the world its home. The house cat is the most widespread terrestrial carnivore on the planet. It's invaded every country in the world because we've been more than happy to carry a kitty wherever we've traveled. We first fell in love with the cat 8,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. It was a time when people's precious stores of grain were being destroyed by rats and mice. First, the wild cats were tolerated, then encouraged, and finally revered as a god. While today we may place less value on the cat's abilities as a pest controller, people still love their kitties. Like other domesticated animals, the cat's natural behavior predisposes them to life with humans. They're attached to a single territory, and they faithfully return home. There are an estimated 78 million pet cats in the US alone, with the same number of feral cats living in the wild. Collectively, these cats will kill more than 1 billion small animals every year. Like all successful invasive species, cats can reproduce quickly. A pair of breeding cats, which can have 2 or more litters per year, could, in theory, produce 420,000 offspring over a 7-year period. Because the cat has no trouble finding food and can multiply quickly, it's a global conqueror that can easily adapt to any new land. But the cat would never have spread so far if we didn't love them. All kinds of things have spread around the world simply because they fascinate humans. One fad that really got around was the hula hoop. It first hit the market in 1958. 20 million were sold in its first 6 months on the shelves. 100 million were sold internationally. The hula hoop was considered good exercise for both the body and mind. It also generated its own kind of dancing. Even animals got into a spin over the hula hoop. The hula hoop craze never actually died out. Its fans just outgrew it. One thing we'll never outgrow is the cat. We'll willingly take it with us no matter where we travel. Our next contender has also hitched a ride all over the planet. But unlike the cat, it wasn't a friend, but a deadly enemy.
Number 2.
Our next contender has managed to both conquer the globe and terrify humans for centuries. Scurrying in to number 2 in the countdown is the rat. These rodents originated in Asia, but now occupy every continent except Antarctica. There are more than 1,000 species of rat, but only 2 have spread right around the world. The brown and black rat are not afraid of humans. After all, we share the same houses and eat the same food. Rats prefer cereals, but they will devour almost anything. One brown rat was found to have 40 different types of food in its belly. They'll chew their way through everything from soap to old shoes. But when they have the choice, they prefer meat. Their insatiable hunger is responsible for up to 60% of the world's bird and reptile extinctions. Wherever we traveled, rats went with us, usually hidden in the holds of our ships. And when they hit a new land, they quickly took control. Nobody knows for sure just how many rats there are in our cities. New York City Council's Select Committee on Pest Control estimated that there are 9 rats for every person in the city. That's a population of about 70 million rats, and that's a big problem. In the US alone, as many as 24,000 people will be bitten by rats every year. Rats also carry 35 different diseases that are dangerous to humans. And the most famous disease of them all came out of Asia on the heels of another all-conquering army, the Mongols of Genghis Khan. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan and his horsemen came out of northern China to overwhelm every army that stood against them. They ultimately conquered all the land from the coast of China through to Hungary and Eastern Europe. No army has held so much land before or since then. But just 100 years later, they'd lost their grip on their subjects and retreated back to their homeland. Many people died at the hands of the Mongol horde, but that was nothing compared to the deaths caused by the rats that traveled with the army. That's because the rats were traveling with fleas, and the fleas carried the bacteria that caused the Black Death. The bubonic plague first ravaged Europe in 1346. In just 4 years, it wiped out a third of the population, about 25 million people. And don't go thinking that the plague is an ancient disease. People are still dying today. The plague also kills rats, but they breed much faster than humans. Female rats can have litters of up to 10 babies every month for their entire adult lives. And 18 hours after giving birth, she'll be ready to mate again. If they all survived, one female rat and her babies could produce 15,000 descendants in just 1 year. But there is one animal invader that can breed faster than the rat. It's the Countdown's ultimate global conqueror.
We've seen the 9 contenders. They're the worst of the worst. Only one animal has conquered more of our world. It's number 1, and it's coming up next on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 1.
The world's most extreme global conqueror has been following humans since the dawn of history. For 350 million years, nearly all of the 3,500 species have lived quietly in the forests of the world. And then we came along and met the cockroach. It's number 1 in the countdown because no other animal is better at getting under our feet. Cockroaches are so good at hiding in our houses that it's said that if you spot one cockroach, you can be sure there's another 100 that you haven't seen. Cockroaches conquered the world at the same time as humans set sail on trading vessels. The commonest species on the planet is the American cockroach, yet it originated in tropical Africa and was only carried to the New World on slave ships. The German cockroach was originally only found in Ethiopia until it's stowed away on board Greek and Phoenician ships that carried it through Turkey to the Black Sea and into southern Russia. One of the secrets to the cockroach's success is that it will eat almost anything. Even a greasy thumbprint will feed a roach for a week. And if all else fails, some species can survive without food for up to 3 months as long as they have water. But the thing that cockroaches do best is make more cockroaches. From the time they hatch from their egg case, it takes less than a month until the babies are ready to start breeding. Cockroaches can reproduce themselves quickly because some species mate only once, and then the female remains pregnant for the rest of her life. That's why they're the ultimate global conqueror. Just one female German cockroach can produce 200,000 copies of herself in a single year. But not even the cockroach could compete with the speed at which the Rubik's Cube spread around the globe. The puzzle hit the streets in 1977, and in only 5 years, more than 100 million copies had been sold. It's a puzzle with 43 quintillion ways to get it wrong, and only one way to get it right. Which is why, 20 years later, some of America's sharpest young minds still gather to tackle the cube. At the California Institute of Technology, these speed cubers get together to set world record puzzle-solving times.
We're going to start our Rubik's Cube competition today. We have our world record holder here today, Becky, 12.11 seconds, so hopefully he can break that today. We'll get started in a few minutes.
Just solving the puzzle has become so easy that cubers like Shitaro Makasumi can do it with his eyes closed. Literally. Solving the puzzle behind his back means that he has to memorize every move in advance. If only we were as capable of solving the problem of keeping cockroaches out of our lives. They're everywhere, even within our electrical appliances. The problem is that when cockroaches release body fluids, they can cause spectacular short circuits. But the cockroach is nothing if not a survivor. It can even withstand 200 times more radiation than we can. So even in the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust, you can bet that the one animal left to rule the world will be the cockroach. Which is why, when it comes to conquering the globe, the cockroach really is the most extreme.
Where can you find a 30-year-old